has a very unique structure in the fact that it has a first half and a second half. The first half is Dylan's conflict with himself. The second half is Bob Dylan's conflict with the industry. So in the first half, you have Dylan. He's introduced as a bold young talent who knows no one in New York, forces himself into the real folk players, but he can back it up with his talent. So they're excited to have him. Popularity skyrockets thanks to opportunities that have been given to him, and his sound resonates with the protest movement, and he feels restless and trapped. Tension in his relationships begin to grow, and they begin to fall apart. And he decides that he will be true to himself no matter what. That is the first half of the story, and by itself could be its own story. But then there's a second half, and that's Dylan versus the establishment. Dylan experiments with this electric sound. He makes a record with a band, and this worries the folk music leaders and protesters who have already decided who he is to them. All of the players in the screenplay try to stop him. They're afraid he's going to lose everything. But he burns it all down. He doesn't care. He is going to be true to himself. He goes fully electric at the music festival, risks it all, and becomes one of the greatest stars of all time. Let's look at the structure. And in this case, the screenplay fits nicely into the classic 5-act structure. Act 1, the setup, you have this aging, iconic celebrity struggling with irrelevance. The inciting incident is she starts to hear whispers of the black market drug that brings this physical perfection, but she is skeptical and she rejects it. The Act 1 turning point, she is humiliated and decides to take the drug, resulting in an intoxicating transformation. Then we move to Act 2, that's the experimentation, fun and games. The younger self reclaims her fame, people love her, she feels like she can control the substance and everything's going to be great. We should just end the screenplay there. Not going to happen. Rising conflict. She can't remember what her younger self did all the time, so things start to get fuzzy, and then the body horror elements start to creep in. Act 3 midpoint, the unraveling. She tries to stop, but her younger self won't let her because she's having too much fun. The younger self is resistant to her control, and the horror intensifies with these grotesque deformations. Then to the escalation. The real identity is starting to fade away. People only want the younger version of Elizabeth, which is Sue, and she begins to completely replace her. Act 4 is losing the battle. All is lost. The younger self is fully autonomous now. Her body is breaking apart. The gore is gross. She has no control. And then the final confrontation of Act 4 is the showdown between the younger self and the original Elizabeth, and the body horror reaches this peak. Act 5 is the resolution. There's a very dark ending here where the younger self replaces her, and no one remembers that the original self existed, but it is a tragic victory because she rallies and destroys the younger self, permanently disfigured, and the industry discards her again, and then all goes downhill until she ends up a smudge of tissue on the Hollywood star. And then finally, structure. It can fit into several structure profiles, but we'll just put it into the 3-act structure. Act 1, the characters are established. David is anxious and overly cautious. Benji is reckless and charismatic. Their relationship is tense but affectionate, setting up the emotional core of the screenplay. The inciting incident is obviously they go on a road trip to Poland to learn about their family's history and their grandmother. And then Act 2 is the rising action. Tension is building through the tour's emotional weight. Benji's acting out to protect his ego. And at the same time, David puts up a wall to disconnect from any sort of feelings that he may be having as well. And then the midpoint crisis, which is the conflict, Benji versus David, Benji versus the group, Benji versus himself. And that takes us to Act 3, which is the climax, the moment of reckoning when David processes whether he wants to help Benji or detach from him, pull back away. And the resolution here is that David has a new understanding of himself because of Benji, but the trauma remains unresolved, the personal trauma, the family trauma, the cultural trauma, and Benji remains unchanged.